Hello everyone and welcome to the Monster Report, a show highlighting those entertaining creatures of film history. Nick Adam Poling here, and I am on Skype with a friend of the show, Mr. Chris Oglio, all the way from New York, and we're talking, of course, some Shin Godzilla, Shin Gojira. If you saw it in Japan, like Chris had the chance, and some other guys who got the chance to go over there after G-Fest this year and see it on the big screen without subtitles, and now we're back here in the States. 2 days ago, as of the time of this recording, it's been released to the wide public, and some of you have had the chance to check it out, so this is kind of our reaction to that, but I'm actually going to send things over to Chris. I think he might be wanting to take over this show, so hey Chris.
Hey Nick, how you doing? We're turning the tables on this show, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, it's okay. I think turning the tables every once in a while, we got to do something like that. So, you've got a unique perspective, but I think maybe you'd have some questions for me as to my reaction. 2 days ago, I got the chance to watch it with my wife, and about an hour's drive away. So, I'll give it to you.
Okay, so it's kind of cool. At this point right now, I've seen it twice. I will be going to see it again tomorrow night on a third show. Maybe catching it a fourth time, who knows? Depends, but I definitely will see it again. But it's been the reaction that I've been kind of excited for because, getting to hear from all of the G fans here about what they thought of the movie, I think it's going to be exciting. So my first question to you, what'd you think?
Well, I'm going to just make sure everyone out there listening and watching understands that we are spoiler full. We are full of spoilers on today's show, so we can, Chris and I can talk about the movie, so if you haven't had the chance to see it, obviously you need to see that, unless you're just someone who likes torture and doesn't mind movies being spoiled, and then you go in there and, I was expecting that. I actually tried to avoid as much as possible. It's hard to not see the design, of course, when it came out.
Oh, I know.
So when of course he finally made his appearance in full, mutated form that we are, familiar with, that I was quite shocked by, if I were just to talk about right now the monster, that first form when he was crawling on land. And I really loved that.
I have props, hold on.
Yeah. Oh, you have props. I need to see these. This I haven't even seen, guys, so this is
we have
even
props
news
for
to
the
me.
show.
Props from it. Okay. Are these from Japan?
Yeah, these are the Kaiju A and Kaiju B. So you mean this form, the first form?
The first form, yeah. And it was kind of cool, the fact that you kept going back and forth between the human scenes and then the destruction that was happening with him crawling through canals and smashing cars. You got to see the dorsal fins a little bit. You saw his tail, which was not like what we see in his final form with kind of all the the blood marks or the red marks on it. You got to see, what looked like more of a dinosaur. And so when he was starting to approach, of course, there was that real shock that I got from the wide shot that is looking down the street and he's just crawling and he's going towards the camera. And of course, people are running away. That shocked me. The eyes really caught my attention, especially when I thought of the fact that later on, his eyes are going to be proportionally very beady compared to what they are, in that form.
Oh yeah, it's a very, very jarring shot, and I think it's definitely the way it's edited. When we saw it in Japan, I remember sitting next to Alex Rushdie, and that first scene we were just like, whoa! It was a very I don't want to say disturbing, but you just didn't expect it to look like that. I mean, that was the first I had seen of Form A at the time. So it was interesting. Nobody had known anything about it at the time, unless, of course, some of us, unfortunately, we all but the movie program the night of the show, and some of the guys that I was with, I think Kenny Napper and Ryan Clark, they must have opened the first page and like, oh wait, so I'm gonna shut this now. There's a lot of spoiler images in here because they have the pictures of Form A and Form B in the program,
Yeah, that was shocking. It was very abrupt when it switched to it, and he almost kind of had that face like he was smiling at the camera, and it was almost a like at what am I supposed to feel kind of thing. Am I supposed to laugh at that? Am I supposed to be frightened? And I was very shocked, of course, but yeah, I was not expecting that. And I kind of thought along the lines, okay, it kind of is striking me that he's going to be mutating into another form. And, so I kind of thought of that form as he's crawling out of the ocean. He's becoming, he's turning from a sea creature to a land creature. So perhaps he doesn't have eyelids. It was my thought about that. He's a carnivorous kind of shark style creature, but he's constantly changing based on his environment. Of course, because I've always said in my reviews, radiation seems to be the only thing in movies and other things, magic and whatever else, gives beneficial mutations to these creatures all the time, so they can, got thick skin, so they're impervious to weapons. He can breathe fire, and of course, most amazingly, he has even more abilities than the classic Godzilla we're used to. His fire breath not only is more destructive than we've ever seen it before in history, but he's got those proton beams, proton or photon, I think they said, laser kind of beams out of his dorsal fins, and then even his tail breathed fire. And so I was like, this guy's got it all going for him here.
Yeah. That was very different. I had heard the rumor slash spoiler of that about the tail beam prior to seeing the movie, but I didn't know about the beams coming out of the dorsal plates. So that was a very another thing that I was like, what's going on? I mean, it kind of makes sense, again, when you give in the fact that he's had nuclear pulse before and stuff like that in the Heisei series. So but it was just very different to see, and of course they're these crazy long beams that stretch over miles and miles that you see. That it's a very different arsenal of tricks for the monster.
Yeah, and I was actually reminded a little of Barugan from that, because they try to strike at him with short range. They start with everything kind of on the small scale, and they start moving to bigger scale, and by the time the Americans charge in with the B-2 bombers and trying to, hit him with high-level explosives. Of course, they started as effective, so he's got to pull out a new piece of arsenal, which was that, kind of like Barugan. They tried to use long-range missiles against him, and then he's got a rainbow beam out of his back that can target you and take you all out. So, yeah, I think they had to beef him up in size and in special abilities with that. So yeah, the special effects, to me, there were some that just stood out as very in your face great and fantastic and right along the lines of what I expected and were beyond expectations. But there were a few shots, especially the Form A that I noticed, that just I thought maybe it was a little unfinished. Could have used some more touching up with the creature, especially the CGI, kind of standing out again as,
I can see that a little bit.
Yeah, as CGI. That it's obvious. Whereas when CGI doesn't look like CGI, it's doing its job. It's convincing you that this could be real. And that's the way I've always felt about it. And of course, the more practical effects you can get, in my opinion, the better. You want to see a car smash or explode, really put a car in front of the camera and blow it up or smash it up. And they had some of that, that practical effects going on for them too. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my thought overall, speaking of practical effects, is that I did miss that a lot in this movie. There was an argument I had heard from some people, and it's a valid point about the movie. What's the point of doing CGI if Godzilla is just going to look really, really stiff? Versus pseudimation, which people have always often said makes a monster look stiff, which I don't tend to agree with that opinion. If pseudimation is done very well, it's actually quite convincing as a special effect. But and I don't know what the reasoning was, whether it was a limit in the technology of the computer graphic artists, or maybe it was an intentional thing. I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like what we said in the first episode we did on Shin Godzilla. After we'd seen the movie, I know we'd Skyped in with you from Japan, this is definitely the Godzilla movie I want to hear a director's commentary for. Like I know Kenny Napper said that in the previous episode. So and it's true because I really do want to understand maybe what was the reasoning for this. Maybe not so much. There's a lot of cultural things in the movie that I think has made it very popular in Japan, and it's something that maybe we can't understand as Westerners. But there's definitely a lot of elements of what was the thought process behind doing this for this particular film and for this particular incarnation.
Yeah, it was very different. I remember if it wasn't necessarily a spoiler hearing from you and many others. This is a very different film. This is a very different Godzilla film, and yeah, that's an understatement because they start out with the classic '54 look to the opening with that the text rising up and
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that.
I was quite pleasantly surprised and pleased with that. The Toho logo came up. Unfortunately, my theater didn't erupt in applause. I wanted to jump out of my seat, of course, but because you're seeing this in America on the big screen, and some of us haven't had the real chance to see that unless you go to G-Fest, of course, and go to the Pickwick and check out the movies down there. But on the big screen with in a theater nearby your home. But I was. At that beginning, I was thinking maybe we'll have a little bit of the '54 flavor in this. And as it went along, I kind of felt like a couple of things were sticking out to me. Of course, the subtitling of it was quite jarring in the fact that you had every location noted at the top third of the screen, which was something I just had
a lot of it was up down.
Yeah, I just had to let go of the top at a certain point because I just was like, I don't need to, that's not necessary to the plot or much of the story. I can gather that by looking, and I can keep up with the language, of course. But I also found that it was quite quick. Of course, I was leaning over saying, "Honey, how's your speed reading?" I was, and I found myself really wanting them to get back to the monster action. Of course, like any Godzilla film, you kind of feel that way. So as it was going along, I started feeling like, and maybe I'm going to catch some flack for this, but Godzilla versus the democratic process. I felt like.
Yeah, and I mean that's the most different thing about it. It was something we've never seen before, which on a lot of levels I respect what they were trying to do. And again, to the viewers out there, this is an honest, objective opinion. We're going with the good and the bad and the indifferent. So I think it's I think having that for what the filmmakers were trying to do and the statement they were trying to make was bold. But it was definitely something that was overused in the film. I definitely think after the initial Godzilla, when he falls asleep and shuts down after his atomic breath, the film really lags and it's really slow in the middle. And I wish it would have been something different. I wish they would have sped it up a little bit or made it a little tighter and faster. And I mean, but I will say that the quick cutting and the kind of the interesting camera angles was nice because it gave the film a style we've never seen before in a Godzilla film, and I think that's a unique thing with the series. And it kind of just said, okay, this film has a specific style. It has its own voice. You can tell it's not done by committee. It's very much Anno's film,
And I guess in some ways, maybe as Godzilla fans, as classic fans, in a lot of ways, you could say maybe the statement to make is that it left me wanting more, which can be a good thing. I was kind of feeling at times a little bit of the, if you were to say Dark Knight kind of a feel to it, because there was a highly realistic look to this. Whereas you look at a Godzilla film, and we've learned this, and we're going to get into film school stuff, but just to be basic, formalist versus realist. A formalist, there's usually things that are done intentionally for the audience, and it's aware of the audience in a great deal of the film. Realistic, of course, usually it tries to, like The Dark Knight, of course, it doesn't, it's like you are really along for the ride, of course, and so a lot of handheld shots are used in those. Music isn't overused a lot, and this film had some music, but it didn't overuse music. There was a lot of times there wasn't any music, but of course we had some cues to the classic Godzilla series in the music. I'm going to be honest with how I felt about that. I felt like they stood out, almost like I was saying, that they stood out as I appreciate them. I love the fact that I'm hearing Ifukube music on a new Godzilla, but I also felt like it was almost added. It felt added in at the last second, almost out of place.
It did. I didn't mind it at times, but it almost seemed strange that, at a certain point they had cues from different movies in there. Like even the ending credits, which was cool, kind of having a homage of all these different Ifukube tracks from different Godzilla movies. But it was just jarring because it's like, oh, we're getting King Ghidorah's theme, or we're getting Mechagodzilla 1993's theme. It kind of didn't make much sense. I as far as fan service goes, I appreciated it, but you can definitely tell it was not. It maybe might have just been pigeonholed in there just a little bit.
Maybe, yeah. It's almost as if the places where they were trying to maybe build some excitement. What stands out to me is before they launched their final attack on him, to basically kill him. They had that speech, of course.
Oh, the Battle in Outer Space music.
The Battle in Outer Space music kicks in, yeah. And I was thinking, first off, I was thinking Godzilla vs. Gigan, but it was because Battle in Outer Space cues are used in that film, of course. But I was like, they're giving a rousing speech for everyone. But my thing about that was, in that whole planning out of that attack, we kind of had an idea of where they were going to go with it. They had a blood coagulant that they were going to use on him, but it seemed as though I was missing a lot, because there was a lot more to that plan, of course, than just the blood coagulant. It required a lot of other planning, between the ships that were going to launch attacks and the trains that had explosives. We really didn't hear a lot of that. Of all the explanation that we did get from all the political committees, that was one thing that they didn't have in discussion. It seemed like we got a lot of it. Everything else.
No, I definitely would agree with that. It's a film I feel like I have to watch a few times to understand what's going on, because there's so many characters, there's so much dialogue. It's something that I feel like maybe I missed, maybe I'd pick up on things more. I mean, I certainly got a lot more out of the press screening last week, because not seeing the film subtitled was a different experience. When we were in Japan and we watched it, the Japanese audience is everybody's like just very quiet. They don't really react. And we were being, of course, obviously very respectful about that too. And we didn't get all fanboy in the movie theater, but it was a quiet audience. And maybe it was because it was a midnight show. I don't know. But seeing the press screening and seeing the subtitles, and I had heard, it is a very satirical film, and I'm like, oh, I didn't get that vibe when I saw it the first time. But seeing it with subtitles, you're like, oh wow, it's kind of funny at times, and oh yeah. It's kind of poking fun at the way the government's run, and it's kind of making its own social political statements. So that was interesting to see. But I definitely think there's some things that they could have explained more. I for one, like the whole idea where they were kind of getting into, Godzilla has his own like internal radar, and that's why they couldn't get like a clear shot of him. Like electronics would just stop working around him. But it didn't. I wanted to see more things like that, where they're presenting new ideas for the character and new explanations. But instead we got a lot of this political drama, which, I to a large degree I was okay with. I just felt like it got to the point where it was just a little too much at times.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it came down to, and they were even making that point in the film, 2 hours. It took 2 hours, of course, just to act on any plan, and in 2 hours he did all this destruction, and then of course escaped out to sea. And they made that point of saying, we could have made a decision here within 2 hours to do something about this, but we didn't because, of course, of the bureaucratic process. And even someone running down the hallway is complaining about that process and is saying, well, this is what we've agreed to as a government, of course. And I guess if I'm looking at this as an outsider, maybe Japan and the people are wanting to make sure. I mean, this filmmaker is trying to reflect the feeling of Japan, saying we are a sovereign nation. We are a nation that can sustain itself, protect itself. It doesn't have a standing military, but a defense force, self-defense force, and of course, all of their political allies, internationally, are trying to, of course, make decisions for them, and they're trying to say, hang on, we can make our decisions. This is our problem. Let us handle this. Yes, there could be the chance that this problem could become an international problem, but give us our time. And when they were trying to build that intensity of like the clicking clock. We have only so many days before the U.S. is going to come in here and take action, and it's going to be destructive, more destructive maybe than, of course, the creature himself, which I am, of course, throwing my hands up in the air saying, you can't throw a nuclear bomb at Godzilla. He eats that stuff for breakfast, so he likes that stuff. You're only going to make him stronger, and so I was saying, obviously bad decisions. So they've got to come up with an innovative, maybe even a little pseudoscience-y plan. But what was maybe missing in a lot of ways, and maybe it's just from, again, an American perspective, is that moment of saying all these characters care so passionately about that fact and killing the monster and protecting their homeland, but there wasn't that moment that said, here's why. Getting them in front of some refugees or people, driven out of their home, in hospitals, seeing the hurt people that have been affected by this. Those kind of moments I felt like was really lacking, and there was a lot of the relationships between the characters, but not, why it is that they feel so passionately about protecting their homeland. Did you kind of feel that way or something similar?
Yeah, no, I did. Again, it's very different to have an all politician-based cast for a Godzilla movie, so it's new, it's different. But meeting the average people and seeing the citizens, we didn't see too much of them. So, while there were a few sequences with them, running from Godzilla or being evacuated, or there's a scene in the gymnasium where they're refugees are being evacuated, you don't get the sense of really what's going on to the people too much. It's almost like you're being talked to about what's going on, but you're not exactly seeing it. So that's something that I think the film kind of lags a little bit with. I wish they would have had some scenes like that, but again, that wasn't the story the filmmaker wanted to tell, and that's okay too. So, what is your thought about? Yeah, I was going to ask you.
It took a real risk in killing their prime minister. That's something that hasn't been done in a Godzilla film.
Yeah, and again, it was a very bold thing, but in some ways, I guess it was a realistic thing. Thinking, if there was something this destructive, something like that could potentially happen. But again, going back to what you said before, I think a real strength to the film is the fact that you basically see how red tape in, not so much Japan, but I think it's kind of more or less speaking for all governments, shows that good decisions for the people in the moment are not being made because of bureaucracy. And that's kind of something we've never seen in a Godzilla film too much, and I think that was pretty bold. I respect that a lot about the film because it's stating something very true, and which is kind of a sad fact, but a fact nonetheless.
Yeah, it took the risk. Yeah, it went there, and so if you can give it some credit that it did try to do something different, it definitely did that, and I'd say that it, maybe if it were trying to appeal to a wider audience, maybe it could have saved that for more of the beginning, and then I thought with a crack team of scientists that I think our character named Yoguchi, he's kind of the one we're following. He puts them all together, and they're trying to maybe circumvent some of that political red tape and saying maybe we have a little bit more power to get things done. and to have that power basically kind of given to them. And I was kind of hoping that was going to happen. They still had everyone out here, every committee, every department wanting a piece of Godzilla. This group wants, claims to him later on. This group over here wants to say for humanitarian or no, almost an animal rights kind of thing. They wanted to preserve him, and it seemed as though everyone kind of wanted to tear him apart and make and take pieces of him and say, this is my piece, this is your piece. So I could see the argumentation, which when you're sitting there as an audience member, you're just hitting your head saying, oh, come on, people, the solution is obvious, you need to take him out.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my question to you too is, what did you ultimately think of just seeing that evolution of the character on the screen from form to form? What was your thought on that as a Godzilla fan? Kind of not seeing that before. I mean, we've seen that a little bit with Godzillasaurus, and then you see Godzilla later, but you never actually physically see him change.
Right, and that was one of the things I thought again was a little risky to do, to show it like that. I think it was done in a logical sort of way, and there was a few things that were unspoken. I was thinking along the lines of, if he's going to mutate and he's going to get beneficial mutations from his environment, he's going to stop being a crawling around creature, and he's going to be standing upright. And I thought that they were trying to make it clear that when he's kind of crawling and he smashes into a building, and it kind of forces him upright, and he starts growing the arms, even though they were these tiny little arms here. And he started getting that because, of course, he's got to live in the environment that's filled with huge skyscrapers, so he's got to stand up to them. And, of course, a military that's wanting to take him out, so he's got to develop that thick skin. So, again, going on the lines of radiation produces in comic books and movies beneficial mutations for all kinds of humans and creatures, when radiation really does. It actually kills you. It destroys cells, and it's nowhere beneficial. No one's really gotten beneficial mutations from it, but it makes for good storytelling. But I really thought that was kind of cool, actually. I liked that. I was very glad to see him in his final form, and to see how just massive he was. And of course, I love seeing bullets just bounce off of him, and the fact that even the bombs that were falling down, they would hit his skin and bounce off, actually. And I thought that was another way to show how, just how enormous and massive this creature was, and of course how ineffective their so-called modern day weapons were against him.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wish from form B to the final form, it would have been very cool as an effect to see him mutate from, say, the form B, or some people have called him Turkeyzilla, to the final Shin Godzilla. So I was hoping they would have done that on some level in the movie, but I guess maybe it just wasn't part of the story. Who knows?
They missed out on that, didn't they? Yeah, it happened off camera out at sea. Yeah.
Right, to see him to turn into this gigantic thing that just starts stretching and growing, it would have been interesting. You wonder, would he have shed his skin kind of like a snake or something like that? Because while it's a very different type of origin for Godzilla, at least they keep to certain tropes. There is that radiation factor. I prefer my Godzilla more dinosaurian than some kind of organism like he's kind of described in this movie. But did it bother me enough to dislike the movie? No, it didn't. It was different, but I'll always kind of prefer my Godzilla to have a little bit of a truer, dinosaur in the Pacific getting mutated kind of situation. So going back to also some of the little throwbacks, what was your thought on a character for the third time in a Godzilla movie named Goro Maki?
Yes, the third time. I was leaning over to my wife, just geeking out, of course. I was really hoping we would see. I don't even think we got a good picture of him in that profile. I don't think they showed him, did they?
No, it was kind of ambiguous, as to who he was.
Ambiguous Goro Monkey. So I was gonna say, are we going to see? Are we going to see? I'm blanking right now. Goromaki from Son of Godzilla. You know who I'm talking about. Kubo. Are we going to see Kira Kubo come back? As an older man. As reporter, all excited and stuff. Are we going to get a little throwback that way? I was actually kind of hoping maybe we were going to get that. Well, we didn't, but that's okay. That name was, of course, used again, and I was like, Son of Godzilla, Godzilla '84, yeah. That was an interesting throwback. I even liked the fact that they were finding evidence in his notes, the genetic writing that he was doing, the fact that you had to read it by using origami. And I thought that was pretty effective, actually. That was very different. It was almost like a whole like Da Vinci thing, where everything's like encoded and stuff. Very very different, but unique. Getting a little sideways from characters and stuff. Overall, as a film lover, as a monster movie fan, what did you think of Hideki Anno's direction? The direction, I would say, and you mentioned this about the quick cutting. The I felt like and a lot of that's probably editing, a lot of that's probably cinematography, which was solid, but I thought maybe the quick cutting was a little bit much. But if you were to go with his direction, which is, of course, he chooses the lenses, he chooses the shot, and of course he directs the characters. Now if we were to say, he's going to direct the actors to be these characters, I felt like some of the characters could have used a little bit more fleshing out. There were, of course, a ton of characters. I felt like some of them were very stoic. You got introduced to a new character, and this is someone who is an expert in X, Y, and Z, and then they're going to interact with these other characters that are experts in, all the other things that we need to fill in the gaps of what we need intelligence-wise. I felt like everyone kind of did have the same kind of almost background. They're the experts in their field, they're geniuses, but yet they're as socially awkward or socially just difficult, I guess you could say. The young girl who was a biology major, or someone who was background in biology, she was answering a lot of questions, but she was very humorless. I mean, there was the scene where she talked about the stinky shirt, which I was like, this is some character development with a little humor. I liked that. I wish we got a
lot of offbeat humor overall in the film too. It was kind of strange. It was just I didn't expect that when I saw it the second time. I was like, oh, okay, it's like just kind of like this offbeat, slightly sarcastic, and again, maybe it breaks up the tension on some level, but it was I don't know if it always had its place, and again, a director that's come very much and is very revered for his anime. I personally thought there were elements of anime acting in this movie where things were it was just a little too over the top. But maybe it might have been funny for a second. It just got too anime centric for a live action film, I thought. I mean, did you find that at all as a viewer when you watched it the other day?
You do get a feel of the anime style, actually, as you watch this. And a lot of the camera work, even done in the special effects, the cities, a lot of Godzilla films won't use a lot of, not a ton, but chopper shots, all the time, unless the point is to have a point of view shot in a chopper. But, or drone shots, very, sweeping kind of shots over cityscapes and all that. I could see that a lot in some of the anime films that have been out there. But yeah, a lot of the characters, of course, everyone seems to get a close-up every time they talk. There's not a lot of two-shot, wide-shot kind of conversations happening with a lot of people. There's a lot of this character talks close-up, this character talks close-up, this character, and it's kind of formulaic with that. There was a lot of different locations too, which may be the reason why they had the super the script on top, the subtitling at the top for the location. It's like we're now moving to the conference room. Now we're moving over here to the prime minister's office, and it was like, well, was that necessary? Couldn't you have go ahead and have all of the people in the meeting in the same room together and go ahead and get all the talking points out of the way? I guess you do have a lot of location changes, and of course, in animation, all you do is have to draw that new location. In a film, of course, you have to build that set or use a existing set. But that's of course a lot of work, which I imagine. This is probably one of the higher budget films for Japan. I don't know the facts on that, but I imagine that with, of course, the classic Godzillas, we think, of course, of a film in the United States. It's no big deal for a film almost to make or spend $180 million on a budget, and that's really not the case overseas. I know that they don't spend the elaborate amount of money that we spend on films, but I think a lot
Oh
of,
no.
yeah, a lot of, and you can't really tell that necessarily in that film. This film, I won't say that there's obvious budget problems and that's what maybe contributed to things that we don't like. I'm not going to say that because I don't agree with that necessarily. Maybe some visual effects may have been a little rushed, who knows. But at the same time, yeah, I thought you're right. There's a sense of anime in live action in this case, and maybe we'll see that in some of his other stuff. In fact, isn't there a live action Attack on Titan being made or has been made?
Yeah, there were two that were made. That came out in, I think, 2014, 2015. I've seen them. I did not. I'm not a fan of the anime at all. So I saw the movie and I saw the first one. It wasn't my particular cup of tea, but I was happy this film didn't take after that at all. I mean, I know Higuchi tried to use his special effects technique with a puppet mixed with CGI, but from what I understand, most of this is CGI. So, and again, it was okay. I did miss the blend of effects. I think with any movie, with any creature effect, you multiple techniques should always be kind of used sometimes if it works. CGI is great, but sometimes CGI is just CGI and it's not physical. It's not just there. So, uh, you know, in terms of just scenes that stand out special effects wise, what would you say would have been something that you thought was one of Higuchi's high points of the film?
I really like seeing Godzilla at night during the scene right before he froze. Basically, he when he was breathing, of course, fire. There was a few moments that I could see. Yeah, I'm seeing the edge lines a little bit. Maybe I can see a little bit of the fact that it's CG, but I thought that was quite effective. I always loved seeing Godzilla at night. I always thought, of course, he looked creepier. It just really digs down to a sense of fear and dread you have when you
And the
get to
fact that
see
he's
him that way.
glowing almost, he's got like that burning Godzilla effect. Whatever's glowing, which
That was
necessarily
cool.
Yeah.
wasn't always I felt explained why he was kind of glowing like that. That was never really quite. Maybe it was. Maybe I missed it. Maybe I need to see it again. I don't know. But it was interesting because this city kind of goes black out at a certain point, and then he just kind of you could just see him taking center stage of it. Um, and again, the scene where he unleashes his atomic breath. Did you find it very interesting? Almost like a shark. Where his when he bites something, his pupil gets really big. Right before he blows his atomic breath the first time, he just his eyes just gonna go, whoosh, and he's got almost like a shield that goes over it.
Yeah, I thought that was cool because the idea, I guess, he could burn his own eyes from the heat from his own breath. So, yeah, protect his eyes that way. And I also thought, I don't know if the split mouth at the bottom was the same idea there, that the bottom lip may be more weaker, so it splits out. And I was kind of thinking Alien a little bit, Predator, actually.
Yeah, it was very reptilian. It was very much like a snake, and he's got that very long, slender neck, and it was jarring, especially. And again, did you notice too? He has no tongue.
You're right, he doesn't have a tongue. Yeah.
It just kind of the mouth splits open, and it was definitely very jarring seeing that for the first time. And again, just seeing that, like, he bends down, he like just has this gas that goes all over the place, which I guess ignites the air, and then it goes from red to a huge purple beam, which I thought the real big purple beam was cool, and then it's just like this little beam, like almost like Gauss has, which was very strange, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it was concentrated almost. It was like the idea of heat getting hotter and hotter. You can almost get white hot, so it probably got into the violet perspective, and that's why they kind of went with that idea. And of course, they wanted to do something a little different. They started with the fire breath, and then it heats up to show just, I guess, this almost rage attack that he's got. He's pinned down, and he's got one last little, he's got one last big defense to his name, and that's going to be, of course, revealed here, which I guess lends itself to the idea he had to go kind of dormant because, of course, he's got an energy, build up that's just it's exhausted him, and so that's why maybe he, has to shut down for a while, kind of like a nuclear reactor, I guess you could say. And so, yeah, I thought
What
that
did you think of
lent it.
that though? That whole aspect of, we're used to seeing Godzilla have his beam, kind of at whim. Did you like that? Did you maybe think that it was logical, or as a fan you was like, it kind of bothered you?
As a fan, I would like to see that, of course, more. But as yes, the pseudosciency, looking at things, saying, yeah, that's not realistic. I guess I would rather, of course, him being the monster he is, where he seems to have just as much energy as can be, and he's kind of got at will. In the classic, it's as much money as they want to throw at the visual effects. Of course, how many times he used his fire breath, but I would have liked to see him use it more, sure. But I also see that the fact that they built it up so much more as a big spectacle, so he wasn't going to use it as often. But the one thing I guess that kind of bothered me also is that the solution to killing him was logical. It's blood coagulant, which they've tried in the past. Actually, didn't work for the
Yuki
human
special.
character. Yeah, it did not work because whatever humans plan usually fails. Look at my reviews. They always usually happen in threes, but they're gonna bring him down, of course, and then with his mouth open, they're just gonna hope that he swallows this stuff. Now, I could maybe interject the fact that maybe they were actually somehow injecting it, kind of like syringe style, into his mouth. So I could maybe get to the point where I say, yeah, that's why we didn't see things dribbling out of his mouth. Nothing's forcing him to swallow this stuff, but maybe it was actually kind of almost in a way being punctured into his mouth, which ended up working. I thought the fact that they've got to bring him down, of course, and they've got to get these trucks moved in. Luckily the rubble lended itself to
Yeah.
working in their favor. That they had to drive these, fire truck, fire engine kind of looking, yeah, vehicles. No, not
Little
all
bit of
terrain
suspension of
vehicles.
disbelief, in that scene, because normally anything like that, if that were to happen, buildings are down, you kind of can't get through with trucks, But I mean, they did have a long extension, so maybe that's the rationale. I don't know.
Yeah, they had to have. Yeah, there's just no way around that. And but yeah, that plan at the end, I was excited for. I was excited seeing it, but of course, after it was over, I was kind of questioning some of these things. And but yeah, I guess in one breath you can say maybe leave your brain a little at the door, but on the other side, it asked us the entire time to believe that this was the true Godzilla and this is the true movie Godzilla, and so maybe these political things would get in the way of a plan like that happening, and finally when it would happen, I mean, even it didn't work in the first place. Of course, he annihilated the first group of trucks, and that was lends itself to some realism that their plan isn't always going to go perfectly. It's going to have some flaws, but in the end, of course, the human characters take the victory here, which usually they don't. There was one other thing. Maybe I'll turn the tables back after you have to you. Did you feel any sympathy for the monster?
Hmm. Not as much, to be honest with you. And I
Of course, I'm
think
going back to 54. Of course,
yeah, I mean no 54. You do have sympathy on some level for the monster. There's more characterization. I'm going to go out and just for my gut reaction, maybe why I feel that way. I think it's because again, I like the design for the most part. It's different. Is it my favorite design? No. But it's new. It's kind of creepy looking. I'm okay with it. The fact that he was perhaps so stiff moving in the movie, that I think it almost felt like he was there, but he really wasn't alive all the time. And I think that's maybe why I perhaps didn't have as much sympathy for him in this movie as I did in another movie. He was just kind of there. This was really like the force of nature Godzilla. He just was there. I mean, he didn't really react too much. That kind of drove me nuts. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of hated the hanging jaw sometimes, and the fact that he didn't just naturally roar like he would normally do. He didn't really blink. He just had the eyes just looking at you the whole time. So it didn't give me as much sympathy as I would have liked to have. But of course, Godzilla being Godzilla, and I accept that this is Godzilla. Godzilla is always going to be different incarnation. Is You're always going to have that element of feeling something for the character because it's the character. But for this particular version, it wasn't as much. I think I felt more bad for the first two forms of him because he very much was just a creature not of this world, and he's just trying to learn what to do and figure out where they are, get used to his body, being mutated. So
yeah, I could see that. And then in the final form, at that point, you're on the side of the human characters. They've got to annihilate him. They got to take him out because he cannot coexist with us. So there's, when he finally comes down and is brought down, it's a case of it's not the King Kong syndrome where you do feel sympathy for him, which translated to the 54 Godzilla. He's an innocent, largely innocent creature that, again, there was no choice. We have to take him out, even with this destructive force. There wasn't the Sarazawa syndrome where you had this solution to the Godzilla problem that could have been turned into a vicious weapon. They didn't have to do that, but that would have been nice. But that's just an idea. But there's still the fact that there's still a few tears shed for the monster. The fact that we entered into his domain in the 54 Godzilla and took him out literally while he was just laying there sleeping, and then wakes up, and then the next thing he knows he's being attacked by this oxygen destroyer. In this case, they woke him up, sure, but he was fully, very capable of defending himself. So we didn't have that point where we're like, oh man, they're gonna kill him, aren't they? You didn't really feel that. You're almost like, go, take him out. But that's just how I felt. Maybe we weren't supposed to have it, and that's the point to this, that we weren't really supposed to. We were supposed to fear him and put him in that place of, he is death, destroyer of worlds, and if there's any way that we can somehow avoid him,
this was the Godzilla more of I am Death, Destroyer of Worlds. So that's the one thing I will say. I was happy about with this movie that I did not get out of the 2014 film.
Yeah. Even though that little trailer that we got that got taken away, had that quote in it. But yeah, there's that, and then I haven't had really the chance to digest it. Maybe you had the last shot of his tail.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Let's talk about
I
that.
will say, incredibly shocked the first time I saw that in the movie. I was like, it was a what the heck moment. Uh, I didn't know what to make of it. I still kind of don't. I'm not sure what this. From what I understand, talking to some people after we saw it in Japan, they said, that is just very symbolic. It's not meant to say one particular thing. It could be kind of multi-ended and a multiple interpretations. So it wasn't meant to be a story arc per se, but and that's apparently also Hideki Anno. He likes to leave things kind of open like that, and for you to kind of think about. I guess my thought about it is that I guess he's he has the ability to absorb things and absorb his environment. So I guess he was absorbing people, and that's the weird looking Godzilla people out of his tail. But absolutely the creepiest ending to a Godzilla movie. But I thought it was very cool. I thought that was bold and different, and I was okay with it. You know. And again, this is the kind of Godzilla film I don't think needs a sequel for this incarnation. I think as its own standalone film, this film works. I don't know if seeing him come back, finding another monster would work. I think you may need a new interpretation of Godzilla for that. But for like a one and done type thing, this film works that way, in my opinion.
No, you're right. It could. I agree with that. It could really stand alone. And, that last shot, I never really thought of that last shot even as sequel bait, if some people might think that it turned into that. And of course, I could be proven wrong that that it absolutely was, and we'll get an explanation. I actually do like it when films don't explain some things and occasionally leave things up to mystery. When they start explaining things, that's when we get disappointed because it's not what we hoped it would have been. Yeah, it was not what we would have wanted. Yeah, it was below our expectations. What I had in my mind was actually better than what they put on screen sometimes. And I kind of felt maybe they were trying to make a again, it could be up for interpretation entirely, but maybe a statement about the nuclear bombs dropped on Japan, and the idea of the victims of this, and that maybe in a lot of ways, like his tale is some form of icon or statue, not tributing to that, but attributing him to being that same kind of death destroyer of worlds that he was. And so maybe in some ways there was just something specifically symbolic about it. Like Kurosawa even said about some of his films when he was questioned, what does this mean? And he said, not everything in films means the same thing to one person to another, from one person to another. So, everyone takes a little bit of something different away from what they see. And so maybe that was one of those, it really doesn't need a specific explanation. It just needs maybe an open-ended one, as it
And
kind
I
of was.
respect that. I think that's a cool thing. You know, there was so much speculation about the tale for amongst Godzilla fans for months. You know, what is it going to be? There was a rumor that he was going to birth kaiju out of his tail and all that other stuff, and he was going to spawn things like Gargantua or Frankenstein, and I think maybe again another way I kind of took that last shot was okay, the idea of there could be multiple Godzillas, and again, if he's, I guess, spreading his, organisms and his cells, he's growing it from the remains of people that maybe were trampled on, and they're going to become other kind of Godzilla creatures. So perhaps that's what it meant. But again, I like what you're saying. Sometimes it doesn't always need an explanation. I feel strongly about that as well.
Yeah, and I thought, in some ways, actually, they did leave some maybe room even for a sequel. They mentioned, of course, parts of him could become, even winged, and they could fly across international waters to other nations, and that's why, there was this fear that he could make it to other places. So I was thinking, yeah, Mothra, Rodan kind of things. Of course, that's the fan in me, but yeah, there was maybe a little room for that, but maybe it could be a nice closed. I thought this about the same thing about the first Matrix movie, that there could be a huge world for them to explore, but I'd actually rather they just ended with the first one and not give us 2 and 3,
I think most people would agree with that statement.
because it was, again, what was happening in here, the story you were putting together probably was more effective than the 2 sequels that they came out with.
Oh, it's true. It's true.
Yeah, which is yeah,
What is your
which is why I
thought?
like.
Yeah. No, I was saying, what
I
was
said
your?
that. Sorry.
Go ahead. Go ahead. You go ahead.
I'm really sorry. I don't mean to keep rambling, but Godzilla 84, actually, the American Godzilla 1985, that one I actually go back to for the idea of the mystery that they leave you with. In some ways, not the fact that he came back in Biollante, but the fact that, Raymond Burr kept walking around with that little statue, which you might say is kind of a representation of Manda or whatever, or
Or
could
something
be
from Odo,
something
something from Odo Island he got or something, you know.
yeah, making him a mythological, mysterious monster. I always thought that was great because it didn't explain it. Not everything,
No, it's just
yeah,
there.
yeah, not everything needs it. And so, and then even, I'm giving a lot of credit to the American cut of that, but it's because we didn't get it, I guess, on Blu-ray. They're looking around his room, and you see that he's got all these things. Obviously he's an old reporter, and he's got all these things lying around. There's a real history, a real story that can be told there, and then it ends in that shot with the with a little statue that he probably kept from his trip to Japan. And I thought, yeah, really great, but somehow it fits in with our interpretations of the 54 turning into this film, and then the fact that Steve Martin, the character, didn't need to necessarily explain everything himself. He did the best he could with his job, explaining the monster, but really
Right.
what was happening was he was having an experience that had to been experienced firsthand. So I thought, I think that's an effective way of doing some films. Sometimes things happen without explanation, and you're saying, "Whoa, what happened?" And yeah, there's room for that too. But I think a lot of times ending a film with a little bit of mystery, I like that idea. I think that's cool.
Definitely, definitely. And just in terms of how, what do you think of, I guess, the response this film has gotten both in Japan and even here in the States, which actually I was reading before, a friend of mine, my good friend Ian Friedman, actually posted an article about, I guess, box office records of the last few days, and Shin Godzilla is number 10 at the box office, surprisingly, this week, which, okay, you could say, okay, it's the number 10 movie, it's not high on the box office, but think about it for a second. It's in a limited theatrical screenings only, and most of the theaters only have one show. Some of the theaters have more, but most have one show. So the fact that it's doing so well here is great, and I'm very, very thrilled about that. And apparently, also it's the highest or second highest grossing film for Funimation. So it's great. But what do you think of how it was received in Japan and just how successful that was?
Yeah, I actually went to the theater the same way. It was it obviously is limited. I had to drive an hour. It wasn't in the one that's close by my house to see. So yeah, some of us had to trek out there. Of course, I live in the Midwest here, but it's a case of saying the number 10 film. Wow, this is a foreign film. This is a subtitled film, and uh, and yes, number 10, it's not number 1, but yeah, limited release like that, it's not going to make as much money as your Avengers and superhero movies. So what I guess I'm hoping that I'm hearing from all of this is that there is a hunger, there's a thirst for the the kaiju cinematic universe. There's room for that for American audiences to really dig into this. Superheroes or movies are great and all. I just think that we're maybe getting to that point where we're saying, I get it, but I think there's a whole world to explore now in this cinematic universe, and maybe we'll actually get to see some of the fights we've always been kind of wanting from it, between monsters and military versus monster action. Just a ton of stories that can be told, and take some of what's been happening, in Japan and in the past to a modern audience, modern visual effects. I'm hoping what I'm seeing here with that trend is that, despite some of the good, bad, and indifferent reviews this film is getting, people are talking, and they're talking loudly about this. And we've got King Kong coming out here soon, Skull Island. We've got the possibility of another legendary Godzilla. It seems like it keeps going back and forth and back and forth. Pacific Rim sequel. That there is a hunger for a kaiju, a breakout into in film, and not just maybe imported films from Japan and overseas, but maybe some of the American kaiju films as well. So I hope that's what I'm hearing. I'm very happy and surprised at the same time, because that means all the Godzilla fans don't just attend G Fest every year, although you should.
Exactly.
It's
But it's great. Everybody's kind of branching out, and people are seeking this movie. Even I'll tell you, we did an event yesterday here in my home in Staten Island for we did Godzilla Day, and yeah, I was telling people I had the posters there from Shin Godzilla, and I was like, the movie's playing down the street at the UA. Oh wait, I didn't even know it was a Godzilla movie. So you're kind of, people don't know about it. Maybe, and again, because it's a limited screening, they don't have the budget to do a mass advertising campaign, but the word of mouth to get probably like, and again, the social media angle and online promotion to get number 10 spot, it's pretty significant.
That is. It says something. It really does say something, and I hope it's going to bring more of that genre coming out again. And actually, it's something that we've been waiting a long time for, and specifically Godzilla. But I'd sure like to see some more Gamera. I'd like to see some more of the other monster films as well, and King Kong to come back, and maybe we'll start seeing some of the releases. I'd love to see a King Kong 76 out on Blu-ray after we get Skull Island. I'd like to, see some more of these things that are
with
that
the
are out there.
deleted scenes in it too. I hope
The extended television edition. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's true. I mean, look, nothing. I think a Godzilla movie doing good can only mean good things. Bob Eggleton uses that term all the time, and I really agree with him about it, because the only ones that can benefit are us. We've got a new Godzilla movie. His popularity is really great. Hey, we're the winners in the end. Whether we like the movie or we don't. And again, it's I knew when I saw it, much like 2014's film, it's going to be a divisive film. Either you're going to love it or hate it, or you could there's I think a small, well, I think I'm a little more like in the middle of the row with it. I didn't think it was the best thing of all time. I certainly enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it a little bit more on some levels than Godzilla 2014. But I'm happy that we got another Godzilla movie from Japan.
I agree with that. I think I'm with you on that, and that there are parts of it that I really take home and love, and there are a lot of parts of it when it comes out on DVD and Blu-ray I'll probably be skipping past, because I think someone out there online, maybe Eric Hominick, made the comment about repeat watching, and that's a good point. Is that you want to watch a movie like this over and over and over again, and when they're really talk heavy and political like they were. It may be very difficult for an audience to watch all of that and draw it out again, because they kind of know, of course, where it's going. Maybe I want to see a little bit more of the visual effects, which is, I guess, the beauty of DVD and Blu-ray. But yeah, repeat watching, that's another aspect of films that is kind of a difficult thing to get over. Even the video game world has this, the idea of replayability. After you've conquered something, you put it away, never play it again, or after a little while, time has passed, you bust it out again. This collection that's behind me, the only reason I have these films out here between everything Star Trek, Godzilla, Monsters, Ray Harryhausen classics, is because I want to watch them over and over again. So sure. Shin Godzilla will become part of my collection as well, but I can see myself maybe seeking through it and searching through it to find more visual effects scenes and watch those.
Right. I mean, I don't think it will be a Godzilla movie like, say, Mothra versus Godzilla. I will watch it at least once a year, or several times, or like 54. I'll always go back to it. In terms of where it stacks in the totem pole of Godzilla movies, again, I don't dislike the movie at all. I enjoy it. I'm happy that it's here in the U.S., and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing it at least another once, or maybe possibly a second time by the end of the weekend. And again, wouldn't it be a kicker with a Friday box office if Shin Godzilla does even better by the Monday box office reports? Because the weekend box office reports are always the big ones. Wouldn't it be funny if, on some level, Godzilla got pretty high on the spectrum.
That would be funny, and I hope it turns some heads of these executives who say, we know everything, we know what the kids want, we know what the adults want, and they say, hey, there's really something here that hopefully they'll want to say we'll exploit, but we will market well to them and do what we did with the Avengers and the Marvel series. Maybe not necessarily the DC series entirely. Maybe not necessarily the Fantastic Four or Spider-Man series, but
Right, but at
but
least they'll
what
take their product properly, and they'll treat it with respect. That's the best thing we can ask for as fans, from movies. Now, my question to you is, where do you think this is going to be the start of a yearly Godzilla franchise? And what are your thoughts on a future Japanese Godzilla film? What do you want to see out of it?
Well, okay, if there's going to be a future Japanese franchise, I really don't mind in reinventing the character. I didn't mind them reinventing the character a little for this. I wouldn't mind a different take on him as well. I would really like to see some monster fights from Japan, and I think that they can prove themselves with the visual effects from this one. Um, Maybe make Godzilla move some more, and and do a little bit more. Go more over the top with the action, and suspense and character development, really drawing us into the character. But a yearly, because at one time, like the Heisei series and even in the Showa series, it seemed like bam, 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 we were getting one a year. I'd love to see that
Yeah.
again. I'd love to, and I don't even mind if they kind of want to keep some of that ambiguity, that mystery out there for some of the fans to keep them wanting more, like they did at the end of this film. Things like that, I think, draw them in. But yeah, and I don't mind even a darker Godzilla, like they were doing with this one. Very dark, very serious monster.
I
So
kind of wish this movie was darker, though. Did you feel that way too? Like, it was clouded as being very dark originally, but in the end, did you think this movie was the dark Godzilla movie we were kind of hoping for?
not entirely. I was hoping for darker. I was literally physically hoping for darker because sometimes when you see him in broad daylight, even that, it doesn't lend itself to the fear and anxiety you get when you think about him peering out your window at night with those glowing eyes and with a glow from his chest and all that. I think that was really effective at night. But yeah, it wasn't as dark. I mean, yeah, there wasn't even really. I can't even think of any real graphic violence. Yeah, there's some blood, um, but it was quite unrealistic. I felt looking the blood, and it was, of course, in one case it was him mutating. In another case, he was taking damage from the bombs that were being dropped on him. But at the same time, yeah, there really wasn't that. There really wasn't that. That dark level that I was kind of hoping for. Again, kind of going back to the Dark Knight, saying it's taken so seriously. Um, there's quite a bit of villainy in those films. There's quite a bit of characters who are untrustworthy. All the human characters, there wasn't one kind of conflicting with another. Sometimes even a human villain could lend itself to some of that to that feeling of dread that we get from some horror films. Didn't really have that in this one. So yeah, I wish it were darker, I guess.
Same here. Same here. I mean, obviously, we've been hearing the reports that they're planning an anime Godzilla movie, which I'm surprised hasn't happened a lot sooner because of popularity of anime in Japan. I'm not a big anime person, but I will for sure be excited to see a Godzilla anime. But I do hope on a lot of levels they kind of start doing the James Bond approach with Godzilla. If Japan wants to make more Godzilla movies, which again would be great to have, gotta do it like James Bond. Gotta do it every like 3 years or so. You can't. I think having it every year is that's what made the series go into downfall and it gets stale. I would prefer them take their time and just kind of keep the franchise going.
Yeah. Yeah, don't rush it. We'll be patient.
Right, especially because again we have this legendary Godzilla, we've got a King Kong movie, so we've got a kaiju film to look forward to every year for the next few years, and that's kind of cool. And they're different ones too. They're not all the same ones. There's two different. There's a different Godzilla movie. There's a King Kong movie. So and hopefully in between there'll be a Gamera movie. I'm hoping at some level. Katakawa, are you listening?
Get that thing released,
I
yeah.
know.
And Ultraman, I think, too, in Japan,
Of
right?
course, you got Ultraman Orb going on right now, and I still have yet to watch it. I will be watching that soon. But I just finished Ultraman X, which was a terrific show. Absolutely great.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah. So there's another even, kind of. I've always thought of that as like the superhero kind of kaiju, blend there, which really lends itself to maybe again, executives, are you listening out there? Saying, there's a whole world to explore. It's beyond just run away from the monster. There's a ton of different storytelling that can be made from the Daikaiju, Eiga coming from Japan. So yeah, I think I hope that something real good comes from this. But yeah, take your time with it if you're going to come out with a series of Godzilla films. We could be patient. Once a year, you could probably start seeing them look and feel rushed, and we'd rather them give us quality over quantity.
Agreed. And do you have any final thoughts about Shin Godzilla that you would want to share?
I would say I think people should see this, regardless. I think, regardless of this review, hopefully you've seen it already if you're watching this. But some of you are, again, self torture yourself. You watch the spoiler reviews before seeing the film, and then you're not surprised. I say go out and see it, check it out, take from it what you will, but understand at the same time that this is not maybe necessarily a reflection of all of the past Godzilla films. It's trying to do something different, and in many ways, I think that is a good thing. I think that's a risky thing, and and it didn't go the '98 approach. That's the other thing to understand. It's
Amen.
1998. It didn't go full on comedy. It's got satirical moments and it's got humorous moments in it, but it's got a lot of great qualities. There's some things that I was disappointed in, only in the fact that I would say maybe it just didn't meet with certain expectations in certain parts, but in many parts I took away. I took the good with the bad, I guess is what to say about this. So I say check it out, and that's probably a good way to kind of finish up. But yeah, final thoughts you might have.
You know, like I kind of thought when I saw it after the first night, it's not the movie I hoped for by any means, but that doesn't mean it's a bad movie. And I think we should all, as Godzilla fans, support this movie as much as possible in its theatrical screening here, because supporting it could only be a good thing for the character of Godzilla. And again, we're just the beneficiaries of that. Um, Go see it regardless. And again, it's a movie you got to probably see a few times. Now, I'm not saying everybody should go every night this week to see every screening, although I'm sure there's quite a number of fans that are doing that. But go and enjoy it. And again, I'm happy that Toho decided to think a little outside the box and try something unique, like you were saying, Nick, because it needed it. It needed that element of a fresh voice. And again, maybe it may not have been what we were really hoping for, but it had to do something that worked. And again, so much of the imagery in this movie is based on, unfortunately, the things that happened with the tsunami in Fukushima. And again, it's a cathartic way of art dealing with a traumatic situation. So I give it the kudos it deserves because of doing that. But Shin Godzilla is it's a different Godzilla movie. I still dig the design, even the really weird aspects of him on a lot of levels. But um, without a doubt, go see it.
Yep, absolutely. I think, yeah, support this and see what you know is coming out next. I think following the groups on Facebook, going to G-Fest, keeping up with all the feeds on Facebook, Twitter, all that's out there. Checking out Genesis54inc.com for anything that's happened in the past with other great merchandise, especially, your Ifukube 100 and Symphonic Fury merchandise that you have, and looking forward to maybe seeing something out there. We're going to leave some mystery for the audience, but something good, something great, something spectacular in the future from both Chris and John, Chris Oglio and John DeSantis. So probably not in the good time to reveal anything right now, but keep watching this channel for Chris and John to be on here and maybe giving us a heads up, a little bit of thought process, let's say, or some excitement as to something that might be going on in the near future. So is that a good way to maybe put it, Chris?
I would say the best way to say it is we're working on it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
I know there's going to be good things, so I'm just going to be saying that. So thank you very much for your time, Chris. Really appreciate it.
It's always it's a blast always being on the show. So again, thank you for having me, Nick, and definitely, guys, check out the Monster Report. Check out the other episodes you may have missed, and go see Shin Godzilla.
That's right. And thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Monster Report. This is Nick Adam Poling with guest Chris Oglio. We'll catch you next time.